Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi. It's Saturday evening here, and we're watching Hurricane Nate with 90 mile an hour winds. The center of the hurricane is getting very close now to the mouth of the Mississippi River in southeastern Louisiana. It's on a north-northwest course. It's going to pass probably close to or just east of New Orleans as it continues its track inland into the northeastern areas of north and east of Lake Pontchartrain and into the southwest corner here of Mississippi, and then on upward from there. And they've been getting some very heavy rain bands here. Nate, actually, considering the circumstances of everything that was going on, did surprisingly well from the standpoint of strength. It just kind of got on this slow strengthening trend from yesterday and did manage to get almost to a Category 2 hurricane. That was pretty much as expected. There just wasn't enough time, especially since Nate has been moving at a pretty good clip since late yesterday, running at 20 to 25 miles an hour. So it's basically been racing across the central Gulf and right inland this evening. So we will, of course, have some of the rain move up through the Tennessee and Ohio Valley and through parts of the Northeast, which is going to be much needed, and that is a good thing. Here's the Baton Rouge radar at the moment. We see the rain bands have actually been coming in all day long, and you can just begin to see right here in the lower right corner. Here's the mouth of the Mississippi, is just to the north and west, but if you go look at the lower right-hand corner, you can just kind of see that last arc of radar echoes. That's where the center is, and these bands have now reached up almost to Mobile, Biloxi, up further north from there to Hattiesburg and Macomb, and back over to Baton Rouge. And in fact, if you look at the radar, a brief tornado warning did actually pop up in southeastern Mississippi here a little while ago, so there's likely to be a few more of those as we go through the evening hours. Now, with respect to where this is headed, well, let's take a look at the hurricane model tracks, which are been very consistent throughout the last couple of days. They really haven't changed too much, but they have adjusted a little bit further to the north. You can see how tightly clustered they are. You have a few outliers going to the south and east of Philadelphia and New York City, but the vast majority of them take this up the west side of the Appalachians and then eventually across Pennsylvania, southern New York, through central New England, and then on up into southern Maine, whatever's left of it by then, and then north and east of there toward Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. By that time, of course, it's not a tropical system anymore, obviously. Actually, long before that time, it won't be a tropical system. It'll just be a post-tropical or extra-tropical low, much like a late fall, winter, spring low-pressure system. That's pretty much what we're going to see. Here's the satellite view with respect to the Northeast, and you can see everything else that's going on. There's a bit of a frontal system that's moving right through here. You see these clouds that are running from Wisconsin down through Missouri and into Oklahoma. So there's a weather system here that's pushing along, and Nate is going to basically ride along that northward and then northeastward. We're still very warm and very humid here throughout much of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states. It's been, for a lot of folks, it's been described as quite awful. They don't like this weather in October, and frankly, neither do I. It was hard to be outside today for too long without having to feel the heat and humidity. But there's Nate here, and that moisture field is starting to move up through the southeastern part of the United States and into the Tennessee Valley, and eventually that rain is going to make its way even further north. So we're going to take a look at where the GFS model takes us with all of this. And to the top we go. We'll interact so that I can make the maps move, which is a good thing. And we will go back one run because the new GFS run is starting, so it'll just take a second to load here. But starting from the first frame, you could see from earlier today, this was as of 8 a.m. this morning, where Nate was, the frontal system that's out to the west, and you've got some rain up through the Great Lakes with that, but there's Nate moving inland. Now, much of that front is just going to get weak as it moves eastward on Sunday, so it pushes through the northeast with a little bit of rain, but not too much, just a few showers. And then the rain area comes up with Nate. But notice how the rain sets up. It doesn't set up in the coastal plain of North Carolina, Virginia, and the Delmarva Peninsula. It actually sets up more north and west, following the Appalachian Mountains, north and west of there. And that's where I think you're going to see the heaviest rain from this. So this is Monday morning, 2 a.m. Then at 8 a.m. Monday, 2 p.m. has a low on the in western Maryland, and it takes that low into northeastern Pennsylvania and on up into Connecticut. So the GFS has actually been a little bit further south than some of the other models, but where you see the yellow and the darker browns, I mean, that's where we're going to see some of the heavier rain with this. So in terms of total rainfall amount, we will show you that it's, again, arced up north and west of the Appalachian Mountains, which is where you would expect it. There'll be showery rains on the order of an inch or so, perhaps along the coastal plain. I think that's doable. Maybe some spots could push it up a little bit higher. But the 2, 3, or even some isolated 4-inch amounts are going to be well to the north and west. But this area is very dry from the last 4 or 5 weeks. So I think any rain that occurs is welcome, particularly if it's a widespread rainfall. So this is definitely going to be beneficial. And fortunately, we did not see Nate become anything more than what it was, which was a Category 1, borderline Category 2 hurricane. And that is a good thing. Let's take a look at the weather across the country, because out in the west, we've got some snows up in the northern Rockies that are going to move down into Wyoming and into Colorado. Northern Colorado into Denver, getting some snow out of this as this weather system drops southeastward. Now we're into Tuesday, so this will be from Sunday night into Monday night. And then what's left of it really just kind of falls apart. At least here in the east, we're going to have a high building into southeastern Canada. That's going to create an onshore flow. So at least I think once the remnants of Nate move out, we are going to have some cooler weather to enjoy for a change. And that should hold on at least into Thursday. Now, you'll notice, by the way, that there's a weak low sitting well southeast of the Carolinas, and that's a system that's out in the Atlantic that's forecast to move westward. It's already pretty far north, between 25 and 30 north, and the Hurricane Center does mention it as a 70% chance of it developing into a tropical cyclone over the next 2 to 5 days. We'll see what happens to it. Conditions are not going to be all that favorable after Monday, so I'm not sure exactly what we're going to have with this. But assuming that nothing happens with that system, next weekend we have a front with some cooler air, actually some cold air, we'll call it, moving into the northern plains and the northern Rockies. That front pushes toward the east coast but doesn't get too far to the south. Again, because there's probably going to be another upper air ridge that's going to try and build. And then once we get past day 10, it starts to have a bit more of an autumn look to the pattern, but nothing exceptional here. I mean, we're not talking about anything crazy here for the east. And there is some storminess that starts to come into the west, into the Pacific Northwest, beginning around days 11 and 12 and going into the end of the 2-week period. But as we know, how squirrely these models get when we go that far out in the long range. And speaking of which, why don't we look at the upper air? And hello upper air. Here we go. So as we all know, there's been this, we've had this game with the ridge in the east and the trough mostly in the west going on for quite a while here. And that is going to continue to some degree. You do have a flat upper high along the southeast coast and back into the Gulf states. Most of the troughing continues to be in the west, right through days 6 and 7. Where the southernmost extent of the jet stream is only down to about Chicago to New York City. So from there north is where you would see it, expect to see it a little bit cooler. But that ridge remains very persistent right into the middle of the month. And it's only after days 9 and 10 you start to see a little more troughing in the eastern part of the United States. Now, I don't know how reliable this is, because there's been such a tendency for this ridge to to hang so tight and tough in the east that I would be suspect. And in fact, when you look at the pattern, even going in toward the latter part of the month, you still have a tendency for ridging to continue into the east. So, unless there's a surprise here, I think we're going to just keep on going with this month of ours, this month of October, being very, very warm and well above normal in many areas in the eastern part of the United States, while it will be cooler in the west. So I am going to put myself up now on the screen, and I'm going to come back to you guys and say hi. PRJ Grudge and Sean, both, thank you for hitting Super Chat today. Really appreciate it. Very much. Okay, so let me give a collective big hello to everybody. Let me just go back on the chat board here with Delvin on and Zachary, Dio, J-Bug Wolf. We'll get another hurricane hit USA after this hurricane. Bastardi thinks it will be the last hurricane hit at this. Need to know what you think. Well, we're at October 7th. Hurricane hits after this date in the United States, they do happen, but statistically they do decrease. You tend to see systems either well out in the Atlantic or perhaps sometimes confined just to the Caribbean. But right now, I would say that, certainly after Nate, there doesn't seem to be anything to worry about over the next week or so at least. Abaddon, will New York City get 45-mile-an-hour gusts from this storm? You know what? I'm not really too worked up about the wind in this. Especially with the low going by. If the low goes by to our north, I'm going to say, the wind is not going to be an issue here. It's showery rains, and it won't stand out. It won't be anything extraordinary. Let's put it that way. You won't be able to look out the window and say, oh, this is different from another day when we got showery rains. I just don't think it's going to be that big a deal. 80 degrees in October for John Van Oss in Grand Rapids. Yeah. I know this summer just doesn't seem to want to end. Until we get rid of that upper high in the east, we're going to have problems. James, NASCAR fan, high back to North Belmore, of course, as always. Abaddon, did I see the Yankee game and how Girardi didn't challenge the call? I didn't see that part of the game, but I've seen everybody talking about it, and they're not saying nice things about Mr. Girardi. And once again, thank you, Sean, for the cup of coffee. Most appreciated. Let's see. I know the humidity, Sean, is awful. It really is. PRJ Grudge, you are the best. Also, thank you again to you. If we had troughs in the summer and ridges in October, then it doesn't feel like fall because the cool down difference like this is basically nothing. Pretty much feels like a wash. I wouldn't disagree with you. If Nate were moving at 12 miles an hour, would it have been stronger? Well, I think it would have had certainly more time. If it was moving at 12, that's half the speed of what it was moving at. So, yeah, you probably would have it would have been another 24 hours before this would have moved inland. I think you probably then might have wound up with maybe a Cat 3 out of this, but it was just moving too fast. I know Weather NLO 78, you're still waiting for something to come into Norfolk. I think it's going to be really tough unless we get some kind of, near perfect setup at the end of the month. And something, with the ridge in the eastern part of the United States, that's probably not the scenario that would bring tropical systems up along the East Coast. You're going to want to have a deep trough inland of the coast, and there's no sign of that kind of pattern setting up anytime soon. Jason Schaefer, hi back to you. 99 Wolves is rooting for the Cubs. That's terrific. And Sean has a big Let's Go Islanders approach to all this. All right, so that's the latest on Nate. We will keep an eye on things this evening to see how things play out. I got a couple of website posts on meteorologistjoecioffi.com, so do check that out. Thank you again for all of you for being here on a regular basis. We'll see tomorrow. I'm fishing tomorrow, so if I live stream tomorrow, it'll be tomorrow night after I get back. But during the day, I'm going to be somewhat silent. Okay, so everybody have a great Saturday evening, and we will talk to you late on Sunday.